Hello and welcome. I'm Iris Myers with Environmental Working Group. Thank you for joining this briefing on PG&E's plan to crush California rooftop solar. Today we'll be hearing from Ken Cook, President and co-founder of Environmental Working Group, Mark Jacobson, Professor for Civil and Environmental Engineering at Stanford University, Laura Deehan, State Director at Environment California, SB Vielma, Executive Director at Environmental Justice Coalition for Water, Ben Inskeep, Principal Energy Policy and Analyst for EQ Research, and Justin Barnes, Director of Research at EQ Research, who will be available for Q&A. If you have questions, please ask them using the Q&A function at the bottom right and include your name, what outlet you work for, and who the question is directed at. With that, I'll turn it over to Ken.
Iris, thank you so much, and welcome to everyone on the call. I especially want to thank my fellow panelists. Looks like Mark Jacobson might be running a little bit late, so we might go a little bit out of order. But I just want to say a couple of things up top. The first is that everyone on this call, everyone on this side of the NEM 3.0 debate wants California rooftop solar democratized, fully and fast. No one thinks that the California Public Utility Commission's proposal is the place to advance that, much less start it. Now, this proposal corresponds directly with the interests of the state's monopoly utilities. And the first rule of a monopoly is to maintain the monopoly, which means, in this case, prevent competition. And that's what this proposal is all about, because the only plausible competition to this monopoly control of our electric system, our power system in California, as in other states, is rooftop and community solar. So keeping that under control is why we're so concerned that the Public Utility Commission has gone along with so far what looks to be the utilities agenda. There's no one really who has done more to bring this fight to the public, to the media, and to policymakers than Laura Deehan. So with Environment California, you've been such a champion on this. So Laura, I want to turn it over to you now. We'll hear from Mark when he gets here, I'm sure, right away. But the floor is yours, Laura. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ken, for inviting me. And I'm excited to share some of our research that we've done at Environment California, really about the latest with the threats to rooftop solar and why it's so important for us to stand together right now to save California solar. So I'm the state director at Environment California, and can folks see my slides that I just started sharing? Okay, excellent. What I wanted to highlight was some of the findings from our recent report called Rooftop Solar at Risk. We really took a look at what has happened in recent years in other places around the country when either because of the advocacy of investor-owned utilities or because of fossil fuel interests, the Public Utilities Commission or municipal utilities have instituted solar penalty fees or solar taxes and started to try to punish basically people for adopting rooftop solar, or where they've dramatically slashed the net energy metering credits that customers receive. The first place I wanted to highlight, there's really stark example, was from Nevada in 2016. And you can see from this graph our kind of numerical display of what happened, where in Nevada, a very sunny place like California, rooftop solar adoption grew and grew and grew up until that point when the Public Utilities Commission there really changed the solar payment structure. They instituted a solar penalty tax of $35 per month, as well as a 75% drop in the credit, the net energy metering credit that customers would receive. And as a result, the number of people adopting rooftop solar plummeted, as you can see here. It only started to grow once again when the legislature, facing really huge public outcry, reinstituted a strong rooftop solar program that took away that solar tax and gave people fair market value for their solar, the solar credits they were providing to the community. The same thing happened, unfortunately, here in California at the municipal utility level. So it's not just that California would be immune to this. Unfortunately, we've seen the same exact pattern play out where when these municipal utilities ended net metering, solar adoption has really plummeted. And I guess I wanted to share, I think one thing that the graph doesn't really describe is the lives that are impacted when this clean energy industry that's been carefully built up through smart policies to encourage rooftop solar adoption is, basically cut off at the knees when it's really devastated from bad policy, like the one being proposed by the PUC right now. I think this photograph's really emblematic of that. This is from the rally, one of the LA rally last week. There was, I think 3,000 or so people rallying combined in San Francisco and LA last week. Mostly solar workers saying, in this picture, save my daddy's solar job. Obviously in Nevada, it was too late. Many people lost their jobs there. Many lives were turned upside down. But the environmental reasons are really important too. That's the main reason we're working as Environment California to save rooftop solar. We know that when rooftop solar doesn't grow, it's going to mean there's more pressure to build out large scale solar, even more than we're already planning to do. We support clean energy, including large scale solar, but we want to, of course, minimize damage to our important environmental spaces. And unfortunately, if we see that same plummeting of rooftop solar adoption, that's going to mean we're going to have to build out somewhere else, and more of our desert spaces could be threatened. It's absolutely critical that we allow rooftop solar to grow, and our own state agencies have made that really clear. They've said we need, to triple our solar in order to meet our 100% clean electricity goals as set forth in SB 100. And we have so much more rooftop solar potential. And so it only makes sense for us to take advantage of that and make sure we don't, we just cannot afford to see what happened in Nevada, what happened in Turlock happen again here in California across the state. And so that's why we really need to stand up for rooftop solar right now, and why we're calling on the governor to make sure he's paying attention and he stops that solar tax and allows us to save solar going forward.
Laura, thank you so much. And again, there's no organization that's done more to put rooftop solar on the map than Environment California and Environment America. So many thanks to you as a fellow advocate. It's been a work of art to see you in action. Next, we want to hear from someone who has had a profound influence on, I think everyone's thinking, who's concerned about energy and climate change and the pollution that comes from energy in addition to climate gases. No one's done more to chart an alternative future for us analytically and with authority than Mark Jacobson. And Mark, I'm so delighted that you're here, and this is the biggest fight we've seen around California energy issues in a long time, and the public's super engaged. But you come from a perspective that I think everyone can benefit from tuning into, because of the work you've been doing for many years to try and understand how we can go fully in the direction of clean, green, sustainable energy. So the floor is yours, sir. Thanks for coming, Professor.
Well, thank you, Ken. Yeah, so it's really surprising that we have to actually have this discussion that people are trying to stop rooftop solar, slow it down. And the arguments are really perverse. I'm going to make 3 points. And they're actually summarized in this op-ed I wrote for The Hill that I put in the chat if anybody's interested. But they're basically that, you know, this whole solar tax is really an attempt by the utilities to recoup money from the losses due to fires, due to the San Bruno gas explosion, due to the Aliso Canyon gas leak. You know, so the main problems that are causing the fires are long distance transmission, there are electrical sparks from long distance transmission, and the gas leaks are due to natural gas. And so the result of taxing solar will be to increase the use of gas and to increase transmission, which would just contribute to more fires and more gas problems. So it's really a tax on the solution to these problems rather than the problem itself. So that's the first perversity, is that this is just a tax on the solution. And we were trying to address global warming and air pollution. Air pollution kills 12,000 people in California each year. And most of these people live near or in cities and in Los Angeles Basin in the Central Valley. And this, and by eliminating or reducing rooftop solar, we're just going to increase biomass combustion, which increases pollution. We're going to increase natural gas combustion, which increases pollution. We're going to increase out-of-state imports of electricity, which have higher carbon and pollution emissions. So we're just going to kill more people with this policy because we're going to reduce rooftop solar in the future, or reduce future growth of solar, and we're going to just increase gas, biomass, out-of-state electricity will kill more people in the United States. So the argument has been that this will help people in poor communities, but in fact, it'll just make their lives worse by increasing health impacts and increasing their death rates. So the second thing is that the whole assumption, the whole basis for this tax is that electricity use is constant. So there are more people who have solar on their roof and who are not paying for transmission distribution costs. The remaining costs are spread out over fewer people, fewer kilowatt hours, and so other people pay higher bills. Well, this is just simply a bad assumption, an incorrect assumption, because as there are laws in California and executive orders, there's SB 100 and there are 2 executive orders that really require us to go to 100% renewable electricity, and also transportation. One of the executive orders is for transportation and for also all emissions, because there's a zero net emissions law, which would mean all energy will be transitioned to electricity. So we've done a new plan for California, 100% clean renewable energy plan for California, that will satisfy SB 100 and these executive orders. And what happens is our overall energy use declines, but our electricity requirements double. So instead of electricity demands being held constant over the next several years, and then people who are rooftop solar eating into the causing other people who don't have rooftop solar to pay higher bills, that's just not the case, because no matter how much rooftop solar we're going to put up, there's actually going to be more demand for electricity due to the growth of electricity demand, due to more electric cars, people using heat pumps, and electrifying industry. So electricity demand will increase for non-rooftop solar users, and so that will result in the transmission costs being spread over more kilowatt hours, not fewer. So that assumption was wrong. The third point is that the taxes, you're taxing people who are not necessarily even using the grid. So the bigger your system, bigger your solar rooftop system, and if you start adding batteries, the less people use the grid. Because, for example, I have rooftop solar and I have batteries, and I only use the grid 2 to 3 months of the year. I'm a net exporter over the year, but there are only 3 months that I'm actually importing electricity in appreciable amounts, and that's in the winter. And so this is a tax that charges people every single month for their rooftop solar, regardless of whether they use the grid or not. And the bigger your system and the more batteries you have, you can eventually go off the grid entirely, in which case you'll actually pay the largest tax because it's based on how big your solar system is. So it's a very perverse tax, a very perverse incentive. It's not actually charging people for their actual grid use. It's just charging it based on some random factor, which is your kilowatt hours of solar. But the more kilowatt hours of solar you have, the less likely you're using the grid. And so it's basically PG&E and all the other utilities would just be taking your money for no service provided. So there's no proof that people are actually using the grid who are using solar. If you want to do a charge, it should be actually based on what you're actually using, not just based on how much solar you have on your roof. So it's just a ridiculous tax system. So anyway, I'm happy to answer any questions, but I think you have other people talking.
Yeah, Mark, thank you so much. And I'm sure there will be questions that come back to you. I see one question already in the Q&A panel from Jeff St. John. We'll just invite anyone who has a question to put it into that Q&A slot, and we will get to them in due course. And we'll start with yours, Jeff, when we hear from our last few speakers. SB Vielma is Executive Director of Environmental Justice Coalition for Water. She's a very prominent spokesperson in the state for environmental justice concerns, generally speaking, and comes to this debate in a distinctive position because a lot of the premise for the proposal that we are challenging, that's before the California Public Utilities Commission, is premised on the notion that it is working class communities that are being burdened by the cost shift supposed argument that's being made. And so SB, and there are many environmental justice organizations that agree with you and are concerned about this proposal. But SB, let's turn it over and hear from you. Thank you for joining.
Again, thank you, Ken, for that introduction. And I also, as part of the Coalition for Environmental, for the Coalition for Water, we also formed the Coalition for Environmental Equity and Economics, EJCW, along with Pastor Ambrose Carroll of Green the Church. And we refer to it as CPUC. And so we formed this alliance of grassroots environmental justice, immigrant rights, and faith-based organizations, specifically in terms of the clean energy component, in terms of us having transformation from the current centralized system, the grid that we have, to a decentralized system, so that our environmental social justice communities, working class families, can have and lower their electric bills and provide a more resilient face in the upcoming climate change, or the climate change we have happening now. But the current proposed decision by the CPUC is going to be significantly harmful for our EJ communities, because despite the rhetoric, it's very unfavorable for our ESJ and working class communities. The proposed decision, like Laura was giving us some facts, has a market transition credit where it's $26 per month for eligible PG&E customers and $31 per month for eligible Southern California Edison customers. There's no incentives or proposal for the customers for San Diego Gas and Electric. And the program itself, that's on their proposal, after 10 years, the customers who sign up have to sign up within the next 4 years, but after 10 years, that incentive goes away. And there were proposals submitted to the CPUC by Grid Alternatives, Vote Solar, the Sierra Club, and CPUC also had our statement on solar equity, but that again was not taken into account. And this market transition credit is not equitable at all. It's basically cookie crumbs for our frontline communities. And there is no consumer education or protection. So this market transition credit incentive is not funded. There's no kind of program that's going to roll out as a result of it. And this plan, in essence, will decimate what the best tool that we have right now to combat systematic environmental inequity and green job growth. So it's important to note that our ESJ communities are going to be the first to suffer the consequences of California's continued dependence on fossil fuels in the form of air and water pollution and high asthma rates, like some of our previous speakers had stated. These public health impacts are going to be the real cost of California policy that slows the adoption of on-site solar energy statewide. Shutting down power plants and phasing out diesel and gas-powered vehicles can only happen if California accelerates the adoption of the on-site solar and energy storage everywhere. But the proposed decision is going to hurt the mainstream market as well as the market in our lower income and ESJ communities. And last but not least, like others have stated, that ESJ communities will suffer job losses due to the shutdown of California's on-site solar market. A lot of these small solar businesses are owned by women and by our communities and our EJ communities, and employ a lot of local community members. And they will go out of business, and the opportunities for economic development in our rural areas and our ESJ communities will dry up. So in fact, this NEM decision that's proposed currently is not only going to affect the market in terms of the green jobs and the opportunities, but it's basically going to go back to where solar is going to be only for the wealthy, and it's not going to open up the market for our environmental justice communities. And so that is the reason that we have formed together in this coalition for environmental equity and economics. And we do have our grassroots brothers and sisters that are part of this, and we are moving forward on this agenda item. And we anything that you need as far as questions or concerns or where we're at, we we have our webpage, which is See Truth. So, and again, any questions that you all may have, I'm open to as well. Thank you.
Espy, thank you so much. Obvious why you're a leader in environmental justice issues and policy generally in California. Thank you so much. And just thank you for bringing up the jobs argument so clearly. Just one more addition to that is that these will be jobs in the communities. These aren't centralized jobs off in some distant area associated with a power plant. And work is work, and we value it. I know we all do on this call, having people having good paying jobs, but it'll be especially harmful because it will be distributed, unfortunately, if that dip happens, as Laura's chart documented. It's going to hurt people right in those communities right there. So thank you for emphasizing that. Our last speaker is Ben Inskeep. And Ben and his organization, EQ Research, have done a really interesting analysis that, among other things, looks at where California would be relative to other states with respect to leadership on rooftop solar and related technologies if this decision is adopted. And we, not to steal anyone's thunder, but we like to think of ourselves here in California as the leaders, but we won't be leading if this policy is adopting much longer, will we, Ben?
Thank you very much, Ken. I'd like to go through a little bit of this analysis I did, but first, let me introduce myself and my colleague. My name is Ben Inskeep. I am an analyst at EQ Research. I'm joined tonight by my colleague, Justin Barnes, who is the Director of Research at EQ Research. EQ Research is a clean energy policy consulting firm. We are based out of North Carolina, but we work across the country on clean energy policy. So I do want to highlight a couple quick things about this proposed decision before I discuss the results of our analysis, as Ken was describing. So first of all is that this proposed decision could be voted on at the earliest at the Commission's February 10th business meeting. It was not on the agenda for the meeting they have at the end of January. The second thing is I want to highlight that this proposed decision would not only impact customers going forward, but also the existing solar customers in California, the 1.3 million customers who currently have solar installed. Once they hit year 15 of their system being installed, they would be reverted onto this new net billing tariff that's being proposed under this proposed decision. Now that's in contrast to what they've been promised, which is a 20-year lock-in period. So when they made their initial investment, that was what they were told. And now the Commission is proposing to change that. So what we did for our analysis of this proposed decision to look at the impacts it would have on rooftop solar customers was we examined how it would impact the residential customer's solar savings rate. Now, that solar savings rate is a hypothetical customer's annual bill before solar. Then you subtract out the annual bill after installing solar, and you divide that by their annual production from their solar system. Essentially, what this is doing is it's representing what each kilowatt hour of solar production is worth to the customer, considering all other factors involved, such as the export compensation rate, the underlying retail rate, and any additional charges, such as the charges my co-panelists have discussed. So all told, what this proposed decision would do is reduce that solar savings rate by 57 to 71%, depending on the utility. And so that's including that market transition credit at the highest level. As you can see from this figure here, that would be an impact that's on par with or worse than that Nevada proposed decision, which up until now has been the most significant reduction issued by a state regulatory commission when they're changing net metering. It's important to note that our analysis also used conservative modeling assumptions. The complexity of that instantaneous netting proposal makes it very difficult to model. And so our simplified modeling analysis is using essentially a hourly netting. So the actual impacts would actually be even greater than is shown here. I just want to highlight briefly 3 elements of the proposed decision that are playing a role in reducing that solar savings rate and are having a big impact on the ability of customers to economically go solar in the future. The first component is the grid participation charge, what some of my panelists have described as a solar tax. That's that $8 per kilowatt hour of solar capacity. In other words, this is a new fixed charge that solar customers would have to pay, as well as the customers being required to take service under specific time of use rates. For Southern California Edison and SDG&E customers, those rates have additional customer charges on top of that grid participation charge. The second point is that market transition credit only offsets a small portion of these new fixed charges, and then it steps down for customers in the future. And then the third point I'm going to briefly hit on is the large reduction and the added complexity to that export compensation rate for rooftop solar customers. So point number 1, that grid participation charge that's being proposed into the proposed decision would be the largest solar capacity charge in the United States of any investor-owned utility for rooftop solar customers. Justin and I looked at the tariffs of 173 investor-owned utilities to do this analysis. Only a handful of utilities have surcharges on solar customers, and none of them have a charge, a solar capacity charge as high as the one being proposed in California, as shown in this figure here. For a 6 kilowatt system, this proposed grid participation charge would translate to a $48 per month fixed charge. And it's really key to note that this applies regardless of whether a customer installs a battery, regardless of their usage patterns or whatever other actions they might take that could be beneficial to the grid. Point number 2, the market transition credit only offsets a small portion of these new fixed charges that are being imposed under the proposed decision. In the figure here, you can see the impact of that market transition by that shaded red line where the hashes show that market transition credit only reducing the overall charge by a small portion of it. So that market transition credit is only available to PG&E and SCE customers. So it's not something that would be available to SDG&E customers. And also customers who are required to install solar under the new construction requirements are also not eligible for the market transition credit. I would also note that it's temporary in nature. It steps down each year and then is eliminated by 2026 for new customers that are going solar. All told, when you factor in this market transition credit that lasts only 10 years and you look at those new fixed charges that are being added indefinitely to customers, over a 20-year period, it's only going to offset 10% and 18% respectively for PG&E and SCE customers of those new fixed charges. So only a modest impact in mitigating those new fixed charges. And then last, point number 3, that export credit rate is going to be significantly reduced and very, very complicated under the proposed decision. With respect to that credit reduction, the exports would be measured on an instantaneous netting basis. In other words, ending that practice of netting on a one-to-one basis during that monthly billing period, exports and imports from the grid. And that results in an average reduction of 73 to 84% of that compensation rate for exported generation. It's also important to highlight that these rates would be highly complicated, very complex. Each customer would have to understand, manage, and respond to 576 different export rates each year because they vary each day of the month and on the weekends. And not only that, they vary by climate zone. So if you are a statewide solar contractor, you're going to have to manage these rates in all different climate zones. That's going to be over 9,000 different export rates each year that you'll have to manage and figure out. And so this figure here shows the average of that. So it doesn't illustrate the complexity, but it does illustrate the large reduction in the average from the current the current retail net metering saving rate versus the average rate being proposed in the proposed decision. Thank you very much. That concludes my presentation.
Ben, thanks so much. I hadn't really focused on the complexity from the perspective of the companies that provide solar services. That's going to be another discouraging barrier to get over for those, in many cases, small companies to give an honest appraisal to their prospects for how their solar system will pencil out. So I had not fully appreciated that. So one more insight from your great work. Thank you for that. I think we're ready now to turn to some questions. We have 3 in the Q&A panel, but I just want to encourage other people who are on the call. If you have questions, pop them in there. We'll get to them. If we don't get to them on this call, we'll get back to you with an answer. The first one from Jeff St. John. Can the panelists address the cost shift argument, he put in quotes, argument made by Turn, NRDC, among others? Can you provide links to resources that challenge the cost shift methodologies used by these parties, the IOUs, the CPUC's Energy Division, E3, and other parties that have produced them? So let me open that up to the panel. Any of you who have a response, we can also make sure we get those links into you, Jeff, as we go forward. But anyone want to respond to the cost shift argument? Mark, you did to some considerable degree already.
Yeah, well, first of all, NRDC is not including the costs of the fires, the costs of the gas blowouts. That when they're doing their calculations, they're just ignoring the fact that the more transmission you have, the more chance you have fires, and that'll cause billions of dollars of damage. As those 2017 fires alone were $7.5 billion. So when you don't include these externalities, you don't include the death rates that will increase due to this, then the whole thing is nonsense. And so that's the first point. And so it's really the burden is on them to show that they're including these things, and they're not. I've talked to NRDC, and they have shown no evidence that they include this information. The other thing is their whole assumption of it's that they assume that there's a constant, that they're not accounting for the fact that you're going to increase the electricity production in the state. And because of the laws that require more electricity due to the fact that we're going to go to zero carbon and 100% renewable electric vehicles. And when you account for that, then the amount of electricity that you're distributing over the grid is different from in their assumptions. So I don't have their actual spreadsheet to calculate, but I've looked through their assumptions and they don't account for these things.
Thank you. Anyone else want to respond to that issue of the cost shift?
Yeah, this is Justin. I mean, with respect to resources, I would certainly refer folks to, say, testimony that was submitted in the proceeding, for instance, by, groups like the California Solar and Storage Association. I mean, this is not a 1-minute answer. And, the nature of, defining a cost shift and, how it operates is, is a much longer question to answer. And it's got sufficient technical detail that it's kind of difficult to discuss in, a minute or two. One thing that, I'm aware of is that, this whole notion of using the ACC, the CPUC's avoided cost calculator for defining the export rate, the way they have been doing that is basically a short-term outlook. And I think this speaks to what Mark said, is that, there are uncertainties in that, with respect to what are the long-term impacts of building out, larger transmission systems, larger distribution systems, that sort of thing. But the fact that my recollection is that the PD is using avoided cost calculator numbers for the next 5 years rather than the next 20 years or 25 years. The lifetime of a solar system is one of the objections to the proposed decision, and kind of how that kind of information has been used. And that's kind of aside from the notion of these kind of fixed cost arguments that are associated with what I think is a relatively arbitrary selection of the grid participation charge, which was essentially a number selected in between, a couple different numbers that different parties put forth. I don't think there's a very clear methodology behind how that number was selected, other than, well, it's somewhere in the middle between something somebody proposed and something somebody else proposed. But yeah, I as far as like where that testimony is available, I know testimony is not published on the CPUC website, but individual utility websites, and I think, some of the individual interveners would certainly be willing to provide that kind of information if they were asked.
We'll try and get some of that to you, Jeff. I think we're aware of some of it, at least.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead. Yeah, please,
I can
Laura.
also share. I think I dropped in for everyone to see the a pretty good analysis from the California Clean Coalition about the real cost shift and the enormous cost of transmission build out, that the idea that solar customers would be taxed to do more transmission build out when they're saving the entire grid costs by decreasing the demand for more of that transmission build out if we do more rooftop solar. It's just a ridiculous argument. And we also submitted testimony on the avoided cost calculator, and some of the major things it doesn't take into account. The big picture, though, is we know we need more clean energy. We need more rooftop solar to get to our clean energy goals. And everything we've seen is that when proposals like this are adopted, rooftop solar adoption plummets. When there's a solar tax, people don't buy rooftop solar. And so if we want more clean energy, we should not be taxing the sun. It's the last thing we should be doing. And unfortunately, I think the utilities clearly have a self-interest to raise more money from customers, and I think they've been really persuasive with a lot of influential voices at the PUC recently. So,
thank you. Anyone else? I think we should probably go on to the next question, and we can double back Jeff on that. Sharon from The Hill publication. Here's her question. Just wondering what the exclusion of the proposal from the January 27th CPUC agenda might mean. What's that mean? Any tea leaf readers want to step up to that?
I think we know that because it's not on the agenda, that means it's not going to get voted on. So, and it delays, obviously, the actual either approval of this PD, or what we're hoping is for a dramatically revised decision or an alternate decision that will actually allow us to have growing rooftop solar in the state. And I think there is indication that, like from the governor's own statements during his budget press conference, that more work needs to be done before we've resolved what the solar payment structure should be moving forward.
I think it's all we can really know is that, at least from the standpoint of a lot of people around the state, this issue is just red hot right now, politically. And so we can't know until we see the way events unfold. But surely I think the governor has heard, and so has have the commissioners have heard just a tremendous amount of concern, to put it mildly, about this proposal. A related question, again, it's sort of along the same lines, from Colby Bermel. I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly, Colby. The question is, do you expect the CPUC to soften its PD? If not, what are next steps to deal with any detrimental decision? So in other words, if it goes forward, what are some of the responses, and do we think it will be softened?
I mean, I can say we are absolutely expecting that the Public Utilities Commission respond to the public outcry, to the 120,000 comments calling for, a much better rooftop solar program, and the pretty massive outrage that has been unleashed from the draft preliminary decision. And I would say we're expecting not only for the PUC to soften their decision, but to dramatically change it so that we can allow and ensure that rooftop solar keeps growing is absolutely what we need for clean air, for a livable planet for all of us, to protect our open spaces. And for California to do anything less would be completely unacceptable.
Anyone else want to jump in on that? Speculate about? Yeah,
I just want to add, I just want to add that, that not only in terms of like the utilities commissioners, but I think that, the governor needs to step in terms of making this, a frontline issue for the state of California, and then to be able to, not go down and killing solar as, the governor of California. So I think at this point, with all of the movement that has been made by the EJ organizations, as well as all the environmental organizations that are on the right side of the issue, I think that at this point, moving forward, the governor would have to step in and, weigh in with the utilities commissioners.
Right, and you make a very good point. Both of you make great points. This is not really a split in the environmental community. There's 600 plus organizations, EJ, mainstream environmental community organizations aligned against this proposal in the state. So if you were counting votes in that world, this is an overwhelming opposition. And the only thing I would add to this question you've raised, Colby, yes, we hope, I think they go back to the drawing board and figure out a way that we can both democratize rooftop solar quickly, make sure that the encouraging trend of more and more working class families being able to participate in it, which we've seen in recent years, that we can accelerate that. This is not the starting point for making that happen. This is the starting point for the end of rooftop solar, or at least a very significant dip that we're all trying to avoid, as they experienced in Nevada, where the legislature saw this outrage, felt it, and basically stepped in to clean up the mess their Public Utility Commission made. So no one's going to step back from this fight right now just because they postponed a meeting decision, just to be clear on that. But I think going forward, there's every expectation that we can use the power of this new technology that has really come on board in the last 15 years, and now storage has been added to it. This is a completely different ballgame. Very few people saw it coming. Mark Jacobson would be one of the few who did, and predicted that we would be able to move forward very expeditiously, and that's uncomfortable for power companies that are used to running the show and running the Public Utility Commission on the side. So we'll see what happens, but no one's stepping back from the fight right now. No one's taking too much comfort from a postponement from January, perhaps till February. Jeff, I'm going to, you had another question, but I want to make sure I go to Mark's question, who came in just after yours. Mark Chidiak, again, apologies if I don't have the name right, pronounced properly. Consumer groups like TURN and the PUC Consumer Advocate have raised serious concerns about net metering raising bill costs for those who don't have or can't afford solar. How do solar advocates address this? How do we address that, these concerns that have been expressed?
Well, I'll just say again that the costs have nothing to do with solar. They have to do with the fires, the gas leaks, the gas explosions, and the liability that PG&E and the other utilities are trying to pass on to solar users or people who put solar rooftop. I mean, it's just a way to try to rip off people who really haven't had no role in the damage that's caused. I mean, we're talking billions and billions of dollars of fines and penalties, and people have gone to jail from these utilities, and they're trying to get all this money back from rooftop owners. So there's really no proof that that rooftop owners have actually caused any increase of the cost of electricity. It's really these other things that are causing the increase, especially the fires in the last few years, which are caused by these electrical sparks that are due to transmission, and that's what rooftop solar reduces. It reduces transmission, and should be getting that benefit, and but even in the calculations they do, they don't give any credit for rooftop solar for reducing the sparks that cause fires. So until they actually understand what causes the increase of the bills, they shouldn't really be doing anything. I mean, it's just ridiculous that they're trying to rip off rooftop owners to pay their bills that they've incurred.
Thanks, Mark. Anyone else want to respond to that? What can solar advocates do to address address the question that's in front of all of us, which is how do we get more working class, low income communities? How do we get them into the rooftop solar revolution faster and more of them, and so that they can begin benefiting too? Leaving aside the supposed cost shift argument, we want everyone to benefit from this new technology, this distributed generation. Espy?
Yeah, I don't think that they're going to benefit if they're going to get, tax coming out of the gate. And so there's some monies that are part of the incentive program, but at the end of the day, it's not going to be enough because, there are some facts, like in 2019, the folks were already putting rooftop solar, but there was an incentive to do so. But if you're not incentivized and you're penalized for having the rooftop solar, then our EJ and working communities are not going to want to move forward with that. And only those that benefit, that in terms of having it, they still have to pay into the system. And, like some of us have already said, and some of the panelists, like after 10 years, that the incentive program is not going to be available any longer. And it's basically like when you're looking at the CARE program that they have through, PG&E, your bill is normally $600, you're on a fixed income, widow, well, you get to pay, the low fee of $200. Well, that doesn't really help that person on the fixed income. So now they want to get rooftop solar. Well, you're going to get it, you're going to put into the grid, but you're going to get penalized. So we'll give you some, incentive. And at the end of the day, after the 10 years, you're not going to get the incentive. And so the thing is that, those communities, which are, on the lower income bracket, which are our environmental justice communities, are going to be at the end of the day not have access to rooftop solar in this case. And so we're advocating in terms of moving forward and going back to the drawing board, like the professor said, and looking at this again. And then you have to have do a real economic analysis of this, and then looking to see for the communities that are most vulnerable that currently don't have access. How are you going to make this equitable for everyone in California? And the way it's proposed as of now, it will not be equitable. It's very simple. If you're giving and putting into the system something that is clean energy, and like the professor was saying, but you're getting penalized for fires that weren't caused by putting in clean energy, and then reducing the peaker plants, because the peaker plants also emit all of these, all of these gases and all of these environmental damages into, again, our EJ communities where they're located. So again, its penalty always is going to go to the EJ communities, both on the environmental impact and the economic front. And so the only way for us to do this is to go back to the drawing board and have input from persons like the professor, from persons like the environmental organizations that are representing, thousands of people in California, so that there can be, true equitable access to rooftop solar.
Thanks. Colby's reminding me that we only answered half of his questions. The second one is, what if it goes south on us? And what if the decision moves forward and it's not to our liking? What do we do if there's a detrimental decision? What's the plan? Now, we may not want to reveal all our plans, but the question stands. So Laura, Espy, you're sort of on the front lines of this fight.
I'm honestly not even entertaining that as an option right now. So sorry, Colby. We are really committed to making sure that our governor, who's a clean energy governor, who's really been a climate leader, that he sees this as his opportunity to once again lead California by saving rooftop solar. And we're really hopeful that he will be able to step up and do that for us. And make sure, we've got a new leadership at the Public Utilities Commission. Alice Reynolds really cares about climate change and clean energy. We're really hopeful that that this can get fixed and that we won't be looking at that eventuality.
Same with you, Espy. Is that about how you see it?
Yes, definitely. In terms of the governor stepping up and helping to save solar and not kill, the future in terms of trying to reach, the goals that have been set forth in terms of the, clean energy goals set forth by the state that he's already done. So continue that fight and then and step up on that game. So definitely we're looking at it in the same manner. And, in terms of strategies, they'll be revealed as we move forward if there is anything, that's on the negative side, but we're pushing along with everybody else.
That's right. We're going to run through the tape on this, and then we'll, on the other side of it, we'll all be together, and it's a strong coalition across the state. And the two of you have played instrumental roles in building it. So I just want to call you out for that great work one more time. So we have two questions now from Jeff St. John, and they're kind of related, it seems to me. So let me read them together. What do you all think is the proper way to incentivize rooftop solar to avoid flooding the grid with daytime solar in excess of grid demand, and to store and shift it to provide grid support in the hot summer and in the evenings, autumn evenings, winter evenings? And then related to that is, what do you think are the best policies submitted to the docket for growing solar and battery access for low income and disadvantaged communities, multifamily dwellers, that came up a lot, others who can't readily access or can't access at all rooftop solar today? And should they be taken out of the docket or put through in other dockets? So those particular problems. Anyone want to take those on? Mark, go for it.
Try to answer that. So I think we should incentivize more rooftop solar and reduce their costs even more. We need as much rooftop solar as possible. I mean, as I mentioned, we're going to double electricity demand, and we need a lot of it coming from rooftop solar, a lot more than we have today. So it needs to grow exponentially by another order of magnitude. So anything to reduce the cost of rooftop solar even more, to incentivize it more, is necessary. But to address the bills, and first of all, we're never going to have too much summer or solar in the afternoon, because even if there's a day where we have more solar production than is consumed, we can always export it to other states and clean up other states too. So there's no limitation on how much solar we can produce during the afternoon. It's not just going to disappear. And in fact, we'll avoid blackouts on the hottest days of the year. In fact, in the hottest day of the year in 2020, I produced a net of 12 kilowatt hours more than I used on that day, kept my house perfect temperature with heat pumps, and I exported extra electricity. And there were blackouts in part of the grid, but I was helping to keep the grid stable on that day, the hottest day of the year. So if everybody had rooftop solar, we would not have blackouts in California. What we need to do to reduce the cost of energy for people who do not have rooftop solar is to incentivize the electrification of buildings to get rid of natural gas in buildings. That is the problem. I mean, especially with new homes, people have to pay. There's no reason people should pay for both gas and electricity. You can do everything with electricity better than anything with gas, and you don't need gas for anything. all you're doing is paying extra money for pipes and a gas hookup fee. PG&E charges just to hook up your gas to the property with a new home anywhere between $3,000 and $15,000. They'll want to check before they connect your gas for at least $3,000 to $15,000 just to hook it up. You don't need that if you don't take gas. I know that because I avoided that fee myself. I did not have to put in between $5,000 and $15,000 of gas pipes. You don't even need, if you have an all electric home, you don't even need a carbon monoxide monitor. There are just so many benefits that you reduce your cost not having gas. Going to heat pumps, if like the community choice aggregation utilities, they're trying to incentivize people to electrify their homes. Go to heat pumps, LED lights, energy efficiency. These all reduce cost of energy in your home because they use so much less energy efficient appliances. But when you've got inefficient gas appliances and you aren't incentivized to convert your electric, your other appliances to efficient electric, you're just paying more than you should. I mean, heat pumps cost 1/4 the energy, or use 1/4 the energy as natural gas heaters. So they cost 1/4 in terms of your bill. So if you want to reduce the bills of people who do not have rooftop solar, encourage the implementation of heat pumps, energy efficiency, energy efficient appliances, like LED lights, energy efficient light bulbs, refrigerators, but electrifying everything in your home. That's really what we need to do. And that will reduce costs for everybody.
So we're almost at time, and unless anyone wants to jump in quickly on that question, I think I'll just ask the panelists if there's anything you'd like to add. And Jeff, if we didn't completely kill it on those questions you've asked, we'll try and get more information to you after the show. But anyone have anything they want to say, last words for the assembled good?
Yeah, this is Justin. To respond to that first question about, avoiding essentially kind of over generation during the daytime, if you want to look to a poster child, look to Hawaii. And I can say that, has Hawaii gotten there all the way? No. But, the development of things like a smart export tariff, the development of some of the grid services programs that they have developed and started to just, deploy on on kind of a large scale level, supporting battery storage, dispatchable battery storage, and other, the provision of other grid services through aggregated, rooftop solar and storage systems is the right direction. The wrong direction, in my view, if you're thinking about incentivizing battery storage, is fixed charges. That's something that Hawaii has not done. They have modified the export rate available to rooftop solar customers in a way that has incentivized battery storage and providing that storage during, hours when it's most needed, under their circumstances, which are a little bit more significant, say, than is the case in California right now and have been for a long time. But, fixed charges do not incentivize battery storage. That is one thing that ought to be fairly obvious.
Well, we're at the hour, so I think we'll leave it at that and honor that, if that's all right with everyone. I want to thank the panelists for participating. I learned a lot. Iris, thank you for kicking it off, and thanks to Bond Events for having it run so smoothly. And there's a landing page that I think you all will have received the link to that has background information on everyone who spoke today and their organizations, plus additional background material that we can post there that's relevant to this debate. So thank you all for joining us, and we will stay tuned, but we will not stay out of the fight. So thank you very much.